All right, let's make sure I can get Instagram up here in a second. Taylor, it's good to have you. I'm going to wait just a second while I'm able to make sure the streaming software sets up for a live on Instagram. And it looks like it is here. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Okay, cool. Taylor, thank you so much for joining to talk about your journey just over the last few years, even before we met, kind of where you were at, what happened when you went through boot camp, and what's been happening since. I think a lot of people are going to really benefit from sharing what you've learned, what you've grown in, and also just hearing from you as a person. Would you start by sharing a little bit about who you are, where you are, how old you are?
Yes, well, thanks for having me. I'm Taylor. I am living in North Dakota right now. I am 28 years old, and I'm currently working as a physical therapist. I am also doing a little bit of teaching on the side and in the academic world, and then also just recently started an online ministry school. So that's kind of where I'm at in life right now.
Yeah, and when we were talking just before we got started, it was interesting to me because you were saying how today you're like, I'm working less,
Yeah.
I'm pursuing more things that I'm actually really like aligned, have a lot of peace about it because I know my direction and I'm okay and trusting in the process. So take me a little bit back to, and by the way, being healthier, in that whole journey, like that's also a huge part of it. So take me back to when we first started talking. This was 2021, I think, is when you said you were joining boot camp. 2021 was fall 2021. It's now 2024. So take me back to kind of where you were at and the main reason that you wanted to connect initially back in the fall of 2021.
Yes. So back in 2021, I was 25 and
If I
I
can
was
pause
just
you real quick, you are like super ahead of your years in wisdom and maturity. So most 25-year-olds and most 28-year-olds are not where Taylor's at. I would have put you like 5 years ahead, than where you were actually at. Okay, so you're 25, but actually like 30, in terms of wisdom and maturity. So yes.
well, thank you, TJ. And I actually just give God all the glory because he's the one who's like brought me down this path in my life, which is funny. I told you this when we were talking, but at that point in my life, I had a lot going on. I was just going through a lot. I had just graduated from physical therapy school, which was a doctorate program, so it was pretty intensive. I'd been working as a physical therapist for about a year, and I was also just at a point in my life where I was processing a lot. I was healing from a lot of things that I had experienced growing up. My body was recovering from a lot of things. Um, I was going through a lot just physically and emotionally. And then I was a new graduate working in a pretty professional program. And so I just had a lot of added work stress going on too. And I remember feeling like I was in a rut. And I remember feeling also like there was a tornado all around me all the time. Like my mind and my thoughts were just in a swirl all the time. I always had a to do list that was a mile long. I knew that there were a whole bunch of things inside me that I wanted to do in life. And I just felt like not really like I was going through the motions, but um, yeah, not like I was going through the motions, but it just felt like there was never time to actually pursue the things that were actually priorities to me that I maybe didn't even know were priorities to me. And so I actually was not even looking for coaching. I wasn't looking for anything. Um, I love the Bible verse that says to seek first the kingdom and all will be added because I wasn't even I wasn't even asking for God to send me a coach or anything. I was just seeking Jesus and enjoying time with him and spending time with him, but also having a lot going on in my life. And he, in his goodness, just has always brought me who I've needed when I've needed them. And so I had this inside joke with myself where I said, yes, God saw that I was in a rut and he said, okay, I'll send TJ now. And like, then you came into my life and just a lot changed from there. So that's how I
Yeah,
found you. Your Facebook ads, like you started popping up on my Facebook out of nowhere. I wasn't looking for coaching. I wasn't researching it. Like there was no reason that your Facebook ad should have popped up on my page. I ended up clicking on a couple of them and then someone from your team reached out to me. So
yeah, very, very interesting, right? Because when I think about, where we can be at a time in our life, in terms of the inside, and nobody can even really know what's happening because externally things can look great. You're checking the boxes. Things are externally, in appearance fine or even better, but inside we can have a lot of what you described, which maybe that tornado feeling, like the thoughts are racing, like I can't have clarity on what I'm doing. Things are a little bit more automatic. Things feel like they just kind of happen rather than me bringing intention, and that's a common disconnect that people experience, especially when we first start talking. That they describe their experience. Um, so, in terms of like you weren't looking for coaching and you felt like the Lord really led you to me, and at the time, the team. So when you think about like what kinds of things, because that's something I'm very sensitive to, where I really want people to have peace when they're saying yes to, working with me. I want them to have peace because it's like that is the most important part of taking the next step in anything. And even just as we were talking before, how you said, I don't necessarily know all the outcomes. You had different language. I don't know all the outcomes in life, but I have peace with where I am. In other words, the decisions I'm making now. So what um kinds of things quickly, because not everybody might articulate it the way you did, but you're like, the Lord was leading me in my life. I knew it. And there was maybe even hearing the voice of God, whether it was new for me or whether it was a part of my journey, that was something that was happening. And what kind of sign signals, or maybe even just understanding, did you have that made you say, this actually gives me a lot of peace, that I wasn't looking for coaching, but this is something that I want to pursue because there's something in here worth learning?
yeah. So I had listened to a few of your podcasts when I came across you on Facebook. I started listening to your podcast. I listened to some of your free trainings and I just really loved the language that you used and the perspective that you had. And I felt like I hadn't really heard someone talk like that before, per se. And so that really intrigued me about you. Additionally, like I said, I knew there was a lot wrong, but I didn't really know what I needed. And so then when I started hearing your content and everything, and then one of your team members reached out to me and just kind of talked me through what was going on, if I would maybe want to start working with you, I was thinking, I haven't even really considered working with him as a coach per se. But there was something just really tugging on my heart, maybe is the best way to say it. Let's see. Yeah, I think just with listening to the content that you had put out and really resonating with it and not really know even why I was resonating with it, that really drew me to you. And then Hannah was actually the person who had been reaching out to me, and she asked me a few questions that just really probed my heart. And she really challenged me to work with you, and I'm so grateful that she did. She helped me overcome just a few barriers that might have made me say no to like actually doing the actual coaching versus just listening to your content. And I'm so grateful that she did that.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting is like the challenge piece is a big part of coaching. And so Hannah really stepping in, because I had worked with Hannah. Hannah was a client, and then she was helping with enrollments during a time when she was actually transitioning in her life. So she had left corporate and was becoming an entrepreneur. And she had done sales very successfully in corporate. And we had talked, and I said, "Hey, would you want to help with enrollments? Because I know me, the process, the journey. You can speak authentically. You're good at sales and doing enrollment. And honestly, like a big part of the enrollment process is helping people have that moment where they're being challenged a bit, because you're going to be challenged a bit in the actual process of coaching. So, the fact that she was able to even challenge you, what do you think were maybe one or two things that she needed to challenge you on that you maybe didn't know at the time? And looking back, go, wow, okay, I'm really glad she challenged me in that way.
There were two big ones. So the first was I told her I didn't know if I said, honestly, I feel like I trust TJ, really just having like listened to everything that I've heard so far, but I don't know if I trust myself to be consistent with the process and follow through in it. And so she just really challenged me to focus on progress over perfection. And yeah, just basically challenging that perfectionist mindset. So that really helped me because I felt like I don't want to sign up for this big thing and then not be able to follow through on it. And then the second one was I had just graduated. I had my first real job. So it was the first time I was actually having paychecks basically. And so financials was one for me. And I said, I've never made a big investment like this. I've never spent a lot of money, let alone on myself in this way, you know. And she said a line, and it broke something in me when she said it. She just said, Taylor, sometimes Jesus asks us to do something and he doesn't, like, he kind of just wants us to go for it. And it was almost it was the that line set me free and is what allowed me to go through with it, because it might sound funny to someone from the outside, but for me internally, I was needing that push and that prompting to stop the wheels in my head from turning. Like, is this a bad decision? Is this something, am I making a mistake? Is this irresponsible? And when she said sometimes, like, he asked us to step out, and I went, okay, maybe this is a faith thing and I need to just follow where he's clearly been leading me.
It's so interesting. So when I hear that, like me knowing so much context of where Hannah is coming from in that journey, because of a moment she even shares when I've had interviews with her where she says, what broke it for me, you talk about something breaking. I remember the moment I was on the phone with Hannah. I was literally on the phone with her during boot camp, and I'll never forget it. It was so powerful. Uh, Basically, the Lord encountered her with a vision, a picture, where she was considering, like, should I take this other and I'm only sharing this because she shared this story with people publicly, but it's a powerful story and worth sharing. The Lord gave her a picture of her taking a pot of gold and pushing it over to him. And it was at a time when she was considering, do I take this bigger sales position, do something different? And it was right in the middle of boot camp. All of these things started showing up in the middle of boot camp. She's like, I'm in boot camp for this clarity of vision in my life, purpose and direction, trying to understand who I am, how to align myself with these things. And I know something needs to change. And now here's an opportunity. What do I do? And she's going to the Lord, because that's what I want you to do. I want you to go to the Lord. I don't want you to rely solely, I'm here to guide, and I will, and I'll give you questions and challenges and all those things. But ultimately, you have to have that peace with yourself. And she had this encounter, she had this vision, she saw herself pushing away a pot of gold, and something right there, something changed so powerful. And that was the moment for her when the exit plan started becoming clear. It wasn't I need to run away from where I've been. It wasn't I need to try and, create the master plan. It was, I actually have peace with something shifting in terms of my priorities. And now I look at her and I'm like, she's living her entrepreneur life. And, that has its own challenges, which anybody signing up to live the entrepreneur life props to you, because it's extremely challenging when we sign up to do that. But the power of her going through that experience and then being the person on the phone with you at that time who's like, hey, I'm not speaking from a place, just if I were Hannah right now, I could see her saying something like, I'm not speaking from a place of something I haven't experienced. Like, I'm speaking from a place of like, hey, sometimes faith is required. And the question then to you, Taylor, would be, is faith required in this moment? Is that something that you have peace with? And that's got to be something only you can decide, because otherwise it turns into like weird things around people who have a lot of history with spiritual manipulation, and that's witchcraft. But leaving the choice with you, Taylor, and being like, this is your choice, and also understand faith requires action. So I'm curious for you, when you're thinking about like, I love that that happened, and I'm curious for you, when you're thinking about looking back on an investment really that you made in yourself, right? And now if you're Taylor today, looking back several years ago, and you were to talk to the Taylor then, what would you say if you were Hannah on the phone?
If I was Hannah on the phone, I don't know what I would say if I were Hannah. Well, I
Talking
guess
to yourself, your younger self.
I just, if I'm like older me, I would just say, I'm so proud of you for doing this. And this is actually going to be one of the best investments that you will make. Like, you could invest in cars, you could invest in all of these things, but this right here, you're literally investing in your soul and your entire life. And I'm so proud of you. And it's like going to be one of your best decisions.
Powerful. Well, so tell me a little bit about, what made that a good decision. So tell me, you were talking about how there was like racing thoughts. If we go back to that time and that place, racing thoughts, not clarity, lacking clarity on priority, feeling like I'm kind of running the path that the world had given me. So how is that really, like, how is that affecting you in life, knowing that you weren't necessarily looking for the podcast and other things? What were you starting to notice about how this was affecting you in life?
Whew, when I say I was going through a lot, I was going through a lot. My body was actually like totally shutting down. I started developing all these food sensitivities. There was a point where I could literally just only eat fruits and vegetables because I didn't know what was going to make me sick. Along with the food sensitivities, I was so very stressed out, frankly. And the way that my stress was presenting itself is that my hands would get like bloodshot red, and they would get so dry that they would actually crack open and bleed. It looked like I had a whole bunch of paper cuts all over my hands. And working as a physical therapist, so it was very painful because I needed my hands a lot. Um, and then my sleep schedule was way off. I was waking up in the middle of the night. My female hormones were not doing what they were supposed to do. So it was just having a really big impact on my physical health, which in turn was impacting I just had a whole bunch built up. And so just, it felt like every system in my body was getting hit physically, emotionally, everything.
And you were aware of it, but you weren't necessarily looking for, or even aware that there was some kind of guidance that could
Mhm.
help you navigate it, would you say?
Yes, and I was very aware the whole time that my symptoms were a product of something internal going on in me. I didn't think it was something medically wrong. Like, I knew that stress was driving it. It did feel kind of like a negative feedback loop in that the stress and the symptoms were kind of perpetuating each other. However, I always knew it was something going on inside of me.
Yeah. And so when you think about like potential routes you could have taken, because you weren't looking for coaching, for example. So it's like, I could, if I know there's stress going on, but I see it affecting me with, physically, what kind of options were you or would you have considered in terms of like what route to take in terms of change?
Yes. So because I so much had built up just from things I'd experienced all throughout my life. We all have our own stories and things that we walk through. I also, while I did your boot camp, went through an inner healing program, a Christian inner healing program, and then also sought some counseling just to help me with like basic emotional regulation, teach me skills like that. I felt like each piece was helpful and but each was definitely unique. Like each was definitely a needed piece in my journey and story.
Tell me, and this is very helpful for somebody listening, because some people have gone through inner healing and counseling, and then they go okay, what's the coaching difference? Because there are moments, there's a counseling moment that can happen during coaching, right? But that's not where we're going to stay. We're not going to stay in this place of let's sit in our feelings and validation all the time. So, can you describe maybe the difference for you personally in terms of what coaching was, because you did boot camp and then we worked together after, so you kind of had that longer term perspective of how it can help you affect change, and how that was different from other things.
Yeah, like you said, with counseling and inner healing, there's definitely a time and place to sit with your feelings and to receive validation and be present with all of that. And then also at a point, um, there's not a time when you have to move on, but there is, like, you can't just always be sitting in that place of validation. I feel like one thing we talked about is the victim mindset. And I feel like sometimes when you just stay in that place of focusing on your feelings all the time, it's really easy to stay there. What I felt like was unique and different about you and your program is that I feel like you're very much not opposed to inner healing or counseling or any of those things. And you do refer us to those things when we need them. I feel like you love the breakthrough moment. Like you go for the root of, okay, what's really driving your problem? What is the bottom of this so that we can create real change? So, whereas in inner healing or counseling, you might maybe get to the root and maybe sit with it, feel it, those kinds of things. You, TJ, are really good at walking us like, okay, we've been here. Now we're going to walk out the practical steps to like maintain it. And we're going to teach you how to like really live your life and make sure that your identity is your foundation so that your identity is the lens that you're making decisions through. So I feel like your program is really good at helping someone almost sustain the change so that they can like know how to make practical decisions in life, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, like, it's so helpful to hear somebody else talk about it, because when I'm talking about it, when you talk about something so much and you just do it, you don't even know what you're saying anymore, because it's just like so automatic, right? So it's a part of who you are. It's just automatic. It's like when you are yourself, sometimes you can't even identify that because it's just so familiar. So what I would like communicate in my own language in response to that is absolutely, like, the breakthrough is for sure what I love, and then the practical activation.
Yeah.
One without the other leaves people frustrated,
Mhm.
honestly, because they get the breakthrough moment, but they don't have the discipline or activation to carry it out, or they have the discipline and activation in the same pattern because they've never breakthrough moment. And you need both to actually sustain change. So the fact that you've identified, that's something that is really powerful. Um, for me, is a good, I would say, like, signal saying, okay, good. Taylor, if Taylor can't identify it by now, then maybe I need to change something. But that is absolutely the goal: is having somebody get to that breakthrough and understand the practicals of how does this actually look in your life right now, so that when I talk with you in 3 years, or a year later, or whatever it is, when I talk with you, you're going, I'm literally in a different place in life because I've been able to actually sustain the change over time. Like,
Mhm.
that is trajectory change, legacy change, generational. change. And that's really what we're looking for. So it's crazy to think about how the foundation for that can be laid in 8 weeks, but it really is possible because you do come back to a lot of the principles over the course of your time. So I'm curious for you, thinking back on like maybe one of the biggest breakthroughs for you that you've come back to, or activation moments that you really really look at and go, that was a shift in my life. Is there?
Um, yes, I feel like I had a couple. So okay, so we had workbooks that we did in boot camp, and I remember one of the questions when I started kind of doing some reflection on it, I just realized that I really hadn't been valuing myself as a person, and that lack of value throughout my life um, allowed me to make decisions that I now make differently. And a lot of that actually, well, okay, let me get to the other point because they kind of go together. And then the second one I realized kind of as we were going through is I don't know if it was one moment or if it was a whole bunch of moments that kind of joined together, but I do remember specifically having the revelation. I was sitting and writing it down, and I just had this revelation that somewhere along the lines, my values and my priorities changed from what I maybe came into the boot camp or time with you was. And so that allows me to just both of those combined, like knowing that I have value for myself and just my general priorities in life have changed, allow me to go through my life a lot differently. Like I make decisions differently based on those things.
Yeah, so it sounds like to me it was a real paradigm shift in how you're approaching your life based on a new, you said earlier, kind of like new lens, new pair of glasses, maybe. Like, oh, now that I have these on, I actually see everything around me that hasn't changed differently. Like, I see opportunity differently. I
Mm-hmm.
see myself differently. I see, and as a result, I change how I interact. I change how I behave, what I do. How did that impact? You talk about valuing yourself. A lot of people, frankly, a lot of people in the church are afraid to talk about that because they uh, don't want to go down the road of self, which is like selfishness or the remnant of sin in our lives, brokenness. So how could you describe that revelation that you had in a way that is aligned with God's way of thinking about you and a practical application of how that looks?
Yes, that is a very good question. So I totally agree that it's really easy to maybe make that selfish, but actually, when you truly value, okay, so for me, I had kind of gone through life just almost doing what I was supposed to do, but not necessarily even considering myself as a person that has a heart and a mind and feelings and things that impact them in the world, if that makes sense. So it was kind of like I was just going through life doing what I was supposed to do or what I was told to do. Now, there's a lot of beauty in obedience, especially like we always want to be obedient to God, obedient to the Lord. Um, okay, let me get my thoughts.
I
It
asked you
was
a very
almost,
tough question, by the way. I asked you a tough question. This was not on the questions list.
it wasn't, okay, but okay. So I just basically I realized that I was not even treating myself really like a person. I was kind of just going through life. And when I just had this moment where I realized I haven't even valued my life. The fact that I'm a person and I'm a being created by God on this planet, you know? Like I don't know, it just changed so much for me. And so there's a way that you can value, for me, it looks a lot like valuing my rest, but the rest is both physical and for my soul, I would say. So I just think there's a way that you can basically take care of yourself, like take care of yourself well, so that your motivation is to show up really well in your life. There, that's what we were trying to get to.
Yeah, and it's not an easy line to walk, right? Which is the thing that a lot of people do is they're taught immediately deny self, deny self, deny self. They even know who they truly are. How can
Right.
you deny someone you don't know? How can you deny what you're not aware of? So they're just living their life externalizing their validation, externalizing their value, rather than
Mm-hmm.
understanding there is an inherent value. For God so
Mm-hmm.
loved the world, he gave his only son. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. There's inherent value there. In other words, if even if we're not deserving, God loves us. And so understanding, okay, I'm made in the image of God. Who am I? Meaning, who is God to me? And who am I? And how does that change my perception of how I approach my life? A lot of times, what I see people do is, and what you're talking about is this external thing of check the box, check the box, check the box. And this is how I lived my life, where it was like success, performance, accomplishment. But from what motivation? From what
Mm-hmm.
motivation, right? And if it's always to fill a void, that void will never be filled from success, performance, accomplishment. I think that's ultimately what you were trying to describe, which is I need to not try to externalize these things and instead shift my perspective and realize the inherent value I bring and how to over from that place of by doing things that are going to represent how I truly see myself, take care of myself. Like actually look at my health. Okay, is this worth my peace? Is the way that I'm interacting in this relationship and the lack of boundaries so that I am compliant to somebody else but internally resentful, is that healthy? That's not healthy. Even if they feel better about themselves or our relationship because I'm not stating what I need to state using my voice or communicating a boundary, right? That's a practical example for people. Recognizing inherent value, you recognize boundaries are actually healthy, boundaries set you free. What does that look like in other ways? Taking care of myself, taking care of my body, understanding what, like, Taylor, to show up well, for example, as a physical therapist, needs her hands. And it doesn't do you well if your body is freaking out and you can't even use your hands or you can't do it without pain, right? So just as like a simple example, but you said it very well. It's like recognizing that it's all then from the motivation of like overflow, right? So when you're thinking about, yeah, when you were thinking about some of the things that you felt impacted your relationship with God through even through coaching, because people when they think about their relationship with God, literally, and it sounds crazy for me to even just like even say it out loud, but like they literally think like church. Like that's the only like that like it's church. Oh, my relationship with God, church. Like that's where it is. Right. But so tell me a little bit about how your impact with in your relationship with God was impacted um, just in the process of coaching, like maybe in ways you expected or in ways you didn't expect. Doesn't matter.
I love this question. So I grew up in a more cessationist upbringing, so I really wasn't. I had heard about the Holy Spirit. I didn't know he was present with us. I didn't know he speaks. I didn't know any of those things. And he had really come into my life probably for about a year or two before I met you. And at that point in my life, I didn't really have a lot of people who were an example. I didn't have an example. I didn't have really leadership or someone to, yeah, just basically be a model for me about kind of what that relationship with him can actually look like. Like you said before, growing up, relationship with God was kind of praying before bed and then going to church on Sunday. After the Holy Spirit comes into our life, and I realize, like, wow, we can actually have a real relationship with him and talk with him all the time. That was one of the main reasons I felt like the Lord led me to you, because you had one of the most authentic faiths that I had ever seen. And I was like, I need to know everything that he knows about this, just the way that you would talk about the Lord and the way you would talk to him. And so in coaching, I loved that there were several times where I might be talking to you and you just say, "What's the Lord say about it?" I'm like, "I don't know." You're like, "Why don't you just ask him right now?" And so it's very much just inviting him into literally everything. And it's like there's no separation. He is with us always and in everything that we do. So we get to invite him into every part of our life, including church on Sunday, but including every single moment after that. And so I would say just the way that you invite him into everything and just truly hold him as the highest authority in your life was also really inspiring to me.
You know, what's really interesting is people hate that. People love it and they hate that. People hate that I would include God in a business and have anybody give any money to receive something that God is included in. And my question to them is, why would I leave God out of it?
Oh,
When you
yeah.
go to work and get paid your W-2 or whatever you do, and God is not mentioned in anything, not acknowledged in anything, not brought up in any meeting, not brought up in any decision, and that's okay. But then when somebody's out there saying, "Hey, I actually do really want God first in everything I'm doing," that's a huge part of what we do. And, yeah, you can actually give monetary value and receive something that God will be in. People find that appalling. And I can understand from certain backgrounds why that might be challenging. And also, I'm at a place in my life where I said, there is no separation. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking with somebody on the street, I'm in my home, I'm doing work that God has given me. There is no separation. He's going to be in it, He's going to be acknowledged. And that was a process for me. That was a challenge for a variety of reasons. But I have found that there is no better way to do work, frankly. And I think about, even there's a company that I know of that's it's a Fortune 500 company, and and they essentially they have in like their main headquarters a statement that says something to the effect, God and always is a publicly traded company. And I'm like,
Mhm.
how amazing is that? That people see, wow, God gave us this and we're going to honor him as best we know how, as best we can. So I love that that is something that you took away as something that is of value to you. And hopefully my goal is like anybody that I'm working with grows in their relationship with the Lord too. That's major.
One thing too I would say is that don't just you don't just have us in your training to have us in training. You truly give us the tools that we need and you teach us how to have a relationship with the Holy Spirit so that when we graduate and when we're on our own and you're not actively speaking into our lives, we can go to him and he gets to be the authority in our life. So you teach us how to do that. And that has been, I think that's probably the most valuable thing that you could ever learn. I learned so many amazing things from you, but it's honestly invaluable.
Yeah, that's a game changer. Absolutely. No question, game changer, knowing that you can talk with the Lord all the time and learning how to interact and talk with him in a way that really helps you get activated, because there is that too. There's the thanksgiving, there's the supplication, there's the reverence of God, but there's like the practical question asking, like, Lord, you say that man plans his ways and you order our steps. Can you help me plan my ways? Like, actually, what's the next step now? And like understanding that and getting really practical, like he wants to and can help you do that. Super important. Were you going to say something else?
I just had one thought that I think is good to share. For those that feel like we maybe shouldn't pay for encountering God or anything like that, I just think God's gifts of salvation to us is free. and it's beautiful and it's amazing. And also, God asks us, and I'm not telling anyone to sow anything, I'm not doing that, but God God tells us to pour out our oil for him. And so when you find someone who has an incredibly rich relationship like TJ has with the Lord, and then you get to learn from him, like that's pouring out your oil for Jesus. Like it's costly to then follow him. And so when you get to learn from someone like that, it comes with a price too. So I just wanted to say that.
I had not heard that. One thing that I would add to it and encourage people to do too is like there's a reason that I put out a lot of things that are free. Literally don't cost you anything but your time, which is costly, and your attention, which is costly. And yes, instead of saying here, give money, I say here's a price. And there's a real challenge to your mentality when you say there's a price for me investing in myself. And where your treasure is, your heart will be. People don't understand this, but a lot of people treasure money, and when they put money towards something, they actually put their heart into it too. And then they're actually start to affect change as they start to say, my heart is in this. They say, I'm actually not just passive, I'm doing something about it. And that's one of the principles of business, actually. So it's really powerful when you understand it. But I appreciate you sharing that, because it is true. Like there are a lot of things that are costly. So what is costly for you may be different than what's costly for somebody else, and that's something worth considering. Biggest reservation you'd mentioned was actually what we talked about, investing in yourself. And I'm curious what you would say today, if you were to summarize the biggest change, Taylor, that you've seen in yourself now, even years later.
Yes. I would say right now is the fact that I'm working so much less. Um, there were just a couple key moments throughout our time together that really led me to that place of being able to work less. So, right now, the job that I'm at, I'm actually just working part time, and I'm back home with my family, living back home with my family right now. And that might kind of sound like a regression to people, but I know that it's actually progress because I know it's leading me to where I'm actually desiring to go. But along with the working less, it's so much more than just working less. Like it comes with a whole host of opening so much more open in my life. So I have so much more time for, like I said, I was working through a lot when I met you. So just continuing to work really hard on my physical health and emotional health. It's allowed me to invest so much more into relationships that are really important to me, which I know is one of my bigger priorities right now. It's allowed extra time. I've had a couple big opportunities come up in the last few months that I've been able to say yes to because I've had more room in my schedule. And I know that those opportunities were things I was really excited about. And had I been working full time and so stressed, I wouldn't have been able to say yes to them. So
Yeah,
I'm making decisions more aligned with my priorities because of it, I guess would be a good way to summarize that.
yeah, and even knowing what your priorities are, like having the margin. You mentioned you really valued rest. That was one way that you value yourself, is valuing rest, having margin. And it's like, I value that. And guess what? My life has a lot more margin and a lot more opportunity for rest to invite opportunity, new opportunity that I maybe wouldn't expect. And, I love hearing you use the word excited, because that is very different than somebody who feels like they're in a rut. That is very different than somebody who feels like they're stuck in a pattern, living based on other people's expectations rather than what they know God made them with a unique thumbprint to do in life.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
When you think about a change you were not expecting, and again, now you have this whole perspective of years later after boot camp. We worked together after that for a while, but you can kind of have a unique perspective that somebody maybe who had just finished boot camp might not have.
So, something that I was not expecting during boot camp, or just a change that came about.
Just a change over the course of your life that you were not expecting, that really was catalyzed through going through boot camp.
Yes. Okay. Well, I guess we've talked about this a lot, but had mentioned at the beginning that I knew there was a lot wrong, but didn't really know what I needed. And oh, that makes me smile. I feel like I found more rest for my soul, like Jesus talks about. Like, I remember messaging you a couple months ago and just saying, I was late for my brother's baseball game today, but I got to sit outside on the lawn and like play with the dogs before I had to drive an hour to get there. And I was okay with it. And I just, it's a funny example because prior, I probably would have driven home in a rush, anxiously let the dogs out for 2 minutes, and then rushed to my brother's baseball game and been stressed the whole time. And this day, I come home and I say, you know what, I'm just going to take 5 or 10 minutes just to like let the dogs out, sit on the grass, and enjoy the sun on my face. And then if I get there 5 or 10 minutes late, I'm still going to see the rest of the game. And it was just such, I have moments like that frequently now where I just have physical rest, but my soul is at rest too, so I can actually receive it.
That last statement is so powerful, what you just said. So I can actually receive it. Like you learned in your life how to receive. And that is so dang powerful. I hope everybody listening can be like, wait a second. So there's opportunity, but I maybe am just not receiving. Like that is one of the biggest blind spots for all of us is that there is opportunity every single day to receive. But are you seeing or perceiving what you need to receive or what you can receive and the choices that you have that you get to make? It's a lot easier when you know your values and priorities, right? It's a lot easier, but such a powerful concept. I love that you shared that. What would have happened if maybe you hadn't, because you weren't looking for coaching, just maybe draw out, you can't know exactly, but what would have happened if you just continued down the path you were on?
I think I would maybe know that another life is available, or I'd have a lot of. So, the way I see it is I'm just imagining a calendar and I just see 40 hours blocked out on it, like the traditional 9 to 5 American schedule. And that almost is what America or the world, there's nothing wrong with working. You can do something there's someone who can work 40 hours a week and they're doing it from genuine like joy in their heart because it brings them fulfillment and happiness and they feel like God's asked them to. And then there's someone who works 40 hours a week and maybe feels like a slave to it. So I just see that 40 hours. And if I hadn't worked with you, I would probably still be in that system, feeling like there were other longings in my heart and maybe another way that I'm supposed to live, like prioritizing having a family and being a wonderful mom and pursuing other passions that I feel like the Lord is calling me to. Um, and having these desires, but just having a frustration and a turmoil inside because I wouldn't know how to access it. I wouldn't know that it was actually available to me to pursue.
Powerful. What would you say to the person who maybe needs to know a little bit about their expectations for those desires to be fulfilled? So, for example, sometimes as we don't act on those desires, time passes by, we get more frustrated, and we actually create goals that are bigger than we could ever even achieve in a short amount of time because we want to make up for time. So, who maybe is in that position where they're like, I now have dreams that are just totally unattainable, unachievable within being exhausted and burned out. Where do I even begin? Because I've already tried and it didn't work out.
I would say two things. I would say make margin in your life however possible. So, whether that's taking an hour on a Saturday or 15 minutes in the evening just to really sit with yourself and get clear on what those dreams and priorities are for you. And then the second thing would be instead of having these really big overarching goals that feel overwhelming, think about one small thing that you can start doing today to start taking action towards it.
Yes, instead of optimizing, stabilize, right? And if you're burned out in your life, got to get health stabilized, got to create that rest and margin so that you can even think clearly, got to get your body functioning properly, and then start working towards those goals. And guess what? Instead of taking 3 months, it may take 12 months or 24 months or even 36 months. But an action along with your priorities over time is going to change your direction. It's going to change your trajectory in life. And I think a lot of times people just maybe think about it a little backwards because they try and optimize, right? They're trying to do way too much all at once rather than just starting from where they're truly at, which is what I believe you said, focusing on health and rest so they can be really strategic and come from that place of not being anxious.
And I love that you said that because at the beginning of the call, I said when I first started talking to you, I felt like I was in a tornado all the time, very swirly, a lot of physical, emotional health issues going on. And now I feel like I'm at the point where I feel very, very sturdy in those areas. I'm still working on them, of course, because they take maintenance and all the things, but I feel like right now I just have so much clarity for where I'm going, where when I first started talking to you, I couldn't even really gather my thoughts.
Yeah, that's super helpful to be able to think clearly because there's going to be a lot more challenges in life where you're going to have to face them, and you got to understand how to set yourself up to be able to think clearly, right? Why would you recommend boot camp to somebody? One reason, if not for any other reason.
Oh my goodness, I feel like I have so many. I would recommend TJ to literally anybody. um, I felt very seen and valued by you as a person, which just did a lot for my internal world, but also just your life. You carry such authenticity, authority, wisdom. You have so much wisdom in every area. And you're just a wonderful example, too. You, like we talked about, you love the breakthrough moment, you love getting to the root, and then you love walking out the practical steps of what that looks like also to lead to the true transformation. So,
Well, I receive that, and also I'll give God all that glory. And I will say one of the ways that I know I can give him that glory is my wife, because I would not be the man that I am today. I mean that sincerely. I used to think, in terms of how you honor God and glorify Him, I used to think it was literally just like, God, I acknowledge you in all my ways, all these things. But then I realized actually God shows up through people. And
mm,
I acknowledge God through the people that I acknowledge too. And my wife has absolutely changed my life. Um, I firmly believe, I would say this, you can influence people, you can't change them. Savannah has influenced me in significant ways that have changed me. And yeah, so I think a lot of people have influenced me along the journey, but in terms of my God and in terms of becoming the man I know I can be and continuing to grow because I've messed up quite a few times. I'm very vocal about it. But yeah, I for sure give her a lot of credit as far as the influence she's had on me. And I'm just grateful to God for her and grateful. Taylor, thank you so much for just taking time to share your story, share some things that you've grown in, that you've learned. Hopefully somebody else can take a nugget or two and apply it. Anything else you want to share? Don't have to.
um, I was also just real briefly going to say that the amount of personal encounters I had with the Lord while I was in your program, well, they're the kind of moments that really mark your life too. Like knowing that he would use, like you said, you're honoring Savannah so much, and I honor you as someone who God has really used in my life to speak into my life. And so I honor you in that way. And also, I felt like through you and your ministry, I was able to really encounter the Lord personally in ways that just made me feel like when you know that the Lord sees you personally and knows your name and details about you, it just changes your life and walk. So
100%. Well, yeah, and I'm so happy to hear that because I think that's one of the most valuable things that you can ever have is just not knowing God, but knowing that He knows you.
yeah.
So, thank you for sharing that. Taylor, appreciate you. If you guys are watching, if you're compelled to even just look into boot camp, you can always message me with the word boot camp. I'll know exactly what you mean. Either me or someone on my team will send a message back, and we can see if it's the right time or fit for an introduction call, a clarity call. We talk about kind of where you're at, where you'd like to be, what's holding you back, and if we can help, what next steps might look like to get you there. But Taylor, your story is so powerful. Still not the end of the journey, and yeah, look forward to seeing how more of your stories over the years. But I really appreciate you, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me teach.